be the real. I hope in the year 2017 to finish writing my book, which I think I'm taking or learning from the parallel of the Brave New World book. If you remember, we studied as students. But the future world is going to be about a change from what even we know today, and we think, and again, I have to quote always Bill Gates. I had the honor of being with him in many panels, and he said once, what we're seeing now are the plumbings of the knowledge era. We're still doing the underground infrastructure. We haven't seen the knowledge era yet. What is coming, like what we are talking about as the singularity in 2050, the Internet of Things. We are moving from this Internet that we use to the Internet that will be used by things. The microphone, the seat, everything will be using the Internet, and we will be talking to things more than we will be talking to each other, and things will be using the Internet more than we use it as human beings. This is, the future is something great. If you'd like to look at it and try to study it, you will be impressed by how fast the world is moving. We're talking now about a minute of time. We are late, 1 hour and a half. If you take an internet minute and you imagine what happens in in 1 internet minute, 2 million emails are sent in 1 minute. 400 million messages are posted on the internet. It's amazing what is happening with this new brave world that we are living in through the internet. Therefore, I would like to have the focus when we talk about the subject of this session to be internet or ICT based, whether it is in education or in better living or in trade or in everything. By the way, I have submitted a proposal to the UN, to the WTO, I'm sorry, the World Trade Organization, that unfortunately WTO was born before the internet. And it's a precedent event. They don't know that the internet was invented. And I served as an expert on the panel of experts of WTO to charter the future of world trade. And I said we need a new service mode. All the service modes, trade in services, do not apply to something like Google, which, as I said, is the largest trader. You buy a product, but you don't pay for it. When you go to Google, you are buying a product, but somebody else pays for it. You are not paying for it. So the world is changing in every respect, and we have to realize whatever we want to do, we have to do it in the perspective of the future impact of information and technology revolution. Education. Today, as we are sitting here, we are teaching Syrian refugees in an Azatari camp online to get university degrees, academic degrees, bachelor and master's degrees, while they are in the camps. And we're doing this jointly with the European Union and with the British Council. It's a project to make sure that these refugees in the camps do not waste years of their life. They are studying while they are as refugees. This is one of the great values of information technology that can make us devise and introduce new techniques to make this world better. So whether it is in education or in industry or in every aspect of life, it's so disappointing that the United Nations, and I talked about this with the Secretary General of the UN, it's disappointing that when we started with the refugee problems all over the world, that we didn't come with a project how to build and construct cheap, resilient, sustainable, and safe houses for the refugees instead of these tents. Technology can produce houses cheaper than the tents that are civilized and more comfortable. If we put the technology to it, and I know that Denmark has already produced a portable house which can be used instead of a tent, and it's a house. So technology, through the use of information and telecommunication technology, can solve many of the problems of the world. I shut up here and I leave the word to the first panelist. Go ahead, sir.
Shukran, Talal. Well, I think I will try very quickly to speak about my own personal experience in this new job that I took over from in the telecom company of Turkey, which is the Türk Telecom company. Actually, I came to Turkey first time in 2005, and when we entered into what is a normal telecom company which does telecommunication things, we decided that it would be important to invest in ICT technology along the lines that has been spoken by Mr. Talal. And here we made investments in education, which was basically an education company, which I'm happy to see now, since I returned to the company, has excelled in its field, working internationally and also working beyond content, but also into platform area, which is fundamental, and also is providing the full education program of Turkey itself now into every teacher, every home, and so it's very exciting. Two other technology companies that have grown now into quite a large size, and also working on the technologies that are emerging in 5G technology, for example, with a number of patents in that area. It's quite exciting that I've seen what they've done. And as I returned to the company, I was trying to share with them a certain vision that I would like to have that relates to the human element. And as they listened to my strategy going forward, and I wrote this to all the employees, which went to 34,000 employees, I was describing this human element. And of course, it may sound a little bit extreme for somebody who's associated with technology to speak about the human element. And they told me that the one project they are working on, and they have started with UNDP and other supporters from 2013, was this Life is Simple with Internet. And they showed me this project that they have done, which in fact helped people who otherwise are excluded from using the internet into a trained program involving around 254 volunteer trainers who were training people to use the internet that would not otherwise have been able to use the internet, either out of fear, lack of access, all manner of combinations. These are human beings who are barely making a living, and they gave me an examples of mostly women, for example, who have managed to double their business from 32 customers to 60 customers in a month using the internet. And this was a Facebook, which is of course very cheap over Facebook. The advertising is very, very cheap. And they were giving me this as an example that what I was speaking about, they've already done in the last 2 years. And I'm really proud of what they've done. I mean, this is not something that I have been involved with, but they have done it. That the company is involved in something that is meaningful to just a normal human being that needs to live in the internet age. Is either excluded from it, and therefore that's the inclusion factor. On the access side, of course, that is one factor, but there's also a rejection of the internet by some people out of fear, and of course they worked on that. The people who were trained to help people who are even afraid of technology was most impressive to me, that there's this human touch that resulted in something meaningful. And of course the technology behind it, as Dr. Talal was indicating earlier, of course, is what is the future of the world. I mean, the future of the world is digital, and those who choose to, let me say, live without that reality will obviously be hurt very badly. So the company is working also on digital divide, which is crucial to extend to those who have not. The principle of inclusion does cover that. And I think this project, of course, we will continue now to extend it further, especially with these volunteer trainers who are really, in fact, making all the difference in reaching out to people who just don't understand what the internet can do for them. And that was the part that impressed me the most. I think I will end at this point because I don't want to discuss technology, because that, if you like, is my strength area. But I'm happy to see that the company is moving into reaching out to human beings, and that is in the end what is important. As a last note, I would say that most companies, which again is the idea of the company, it's not mine, but I'm very proud of what they've done, is that they've converted what normally would be money spent on social responsibility type projects, which actually are not impactful, And I've noticed most of these social responsibility projects are being done by people because it makes them feel better about themselves, you know, that we're doing something for other people. And I'm happy to see that they've spent the money and actually have done something for other people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for your excellent and precise and brief presentation. Excellent. And you are a scientist, it's very obvious. So I'd like now, Mr. Matt, and I'm going out of order. I don't want to ask questions. I want to leave it to you to make your own statement of your own choice and not what is dictated as a question to you. So you tell us what you want to say.
Well, I'm really glad that we are not answering questions. Okay. Let me start briefly on what I was planning to talk about. The SDG 17 goals stated by the United Nations and been approved by all the presidents around the world were announced in 2015 on September. Most of the countries around the world at that time, they either have their national plan being set or they are in the progress of implementing their 5-year plan. The question was, how do you align this national plan with these SDG 17 goals? Besides the targets being announced as 169 targets need to be achieved by year 2030. Speaking of Kuwait, which is the country I'm representing here, we had a vision being stated by His Highness in 2007. And the main idea of this vision is to make the private sector lead the economy of the country. This is one. Two, moving from wealth distribution, being a very rich oil country with a lot of petrodollars, moving from wealth distribution to wealth creation. At that state, a new national plan being started with waves of 5-year plan with very much of an ambition in order to come up with mechanism to enable the private sector. The private sector percentage involvement in the GDP in Kuwait is very low. So what are the enabling mechanisms the national plan of Kuwait introduced? 4 mechanisms. The first one is privatization. The second one is the public-private partnership. The third one is the SME, and the fourth one is the foreign direct investment. This is in a nutshell what is the Kuwait National Plan and what are the mechanisms to enable the private sector. The question comes in, and how do we align them with the SDG? Are our national objectives, strategic direction, our KPIs, our indices are aligned with the global sustainable goals? This question took some time to answer because it required a lot of assessment. Some of the concern goals, which are considered very important in some countries, they are not as important to Kuwait because they are already being satisfied with their KPIs. Other goals, we need as a country to work toward these goals. What we are trying to align here is how do you get the private sector involvement? Being from an academic background, moving to a private sector, then later the public sector, I have to state the following observation. None of them speak the same language. There is a lack of communication. Yes, they can hear each other talking, but doesn't mean they are communicating. They are transferring sounds to each other, document to each other, but do they understand each other? That's the issue. Now, let me put it this way. The first, in the academia, they talk alpha, and in the private sector, they talk A, and in the public sector, they talk Aleph. Although they are referring to the same first alphabet, but none of them actually understand the consequence of this communication. It came to me that after having many roundtables with the private sector, in order to empower them to lead the development in Kuwait through many projects, through the four mechanisms I talked about, we have this major issue. The private sector, basically, they ask, what is it for me? Why I have to care about your sustainable development goal? Why I care to report non-financial reporting to the government? I understand some of the corporation they do at the national level because they've been requested by other international legislators to go and report the non-financial with regard to the SDG. However, I'm having very good sense of time, Doctor. I'm looking at it, so don't worry. I'm sorry to get you bored, but I will get you.
We're very much enjoying it.
Thank you, sir. So no, I'm not carried out. I can see it.
It's the second run.
Okay.
It's not the first.
It's not the first, huh? Now, the question is, these issues that raised by the private sector came from the context of what we call business inclusiveness. Even the term is not clear to many. So the question is how you get the private sector in our national plan, at the same time satisfying, working toward the global sustainable goal. That's the major issue, which I found that require some going back to basic, going back to fundamental, and set a proper language. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your perspective on focusing on the country responsibility, because I participated in the drafting of the Millennium Goals. And these Millennium Goals in the year 2000, they say somehow they failed and somehow succeeded. They did not. They failed, except in countries that decided that they are going to do it themselves, like the Scandinavian countries. In Scandinavia, we don't have any unemployment. We don't have any government deficit. They never borrowed from the World Bank nor IMF. Why? Because they decided to become knowledge societies. The solution is to develop, it will come into a knowledge society, and that is the responsibility of the state. And I'm glad that your focus was on the responsibility of the state. Mr. Doany, you could.
Well, as the representative of the United Nations, who draft those 17 goals, who agrees with your early point that those goals they have no chance of being achieved without the private sector. None. Just a few figures on that. There is a gap of $2.5 trillion every year for the next 15 years to implement those 17 goals just in developing countries. And here, a little bracket. Those goals are fundamentally different than the Millennium Development Goals because they are universal. They apply in the United States, they apply in Scandinavia. The Millennium Development Goals was a North-South exercise. It was an old paradigm. This is, everybody's in the same boat. $2.5 trillion. There is no money in the hands of governments to do this. Now, there is money. There's plenty of capital money around the world to do this, but it's not going to happen with the same traditional way that the private sector has interacted or has behaved or has engaged with development issues. It's not going to happen through charity. It's not going to happen through corporate social responsibility. As Paul mentioned on Telekom, will only happen if the private sector business models inherently change in a way that are commercial viable, as well as including poor people into the market, as well as, supporting the planetary boundaries that we live. If business don't change, then it won't happen. It doesn't matter how much the internet changes. There has to be a profound change in the way business models take place. A little bit about the language that Dr. Khaled mentioned. The good news is that we're starting to see, I'm the director of the Istanbul International Center for Private Sector Development, a partnership of UNDP and the Turkish government, and with other partners on board, which was mentioned by the Minister of Development this morning. We are starting to see companies change their business models, from small to startups to large companies. For example, Unilever no longer has a foundation. Unilever no longer has a corporate social responsibility department, because everything that Unilever does is about development. It's about profitability, inclusiveness, and environmental sound behavior. We've seen that the millennial generation, the young people, they don't want to work just for money. They want to work for more. They want to be inspired. They want to work for a company that does more than just giving them a paycheck at the end of the day. Now, the companies of the future are the ones that are going to be able to attract this talent and adapt their business models going forward. We at the United Nations Development Program,